Raising and home educating children is an emotional experience for most moms, and a lot of the moms that I interact with in person, as well as through the great internets, we'll say, through Facebook groups, the mentorship program, a lot of them get teary eyed and then they apologize. And I say, don't apologize. Don't apologize for your emotions that are tied to your kids. They're just so deep. God has given you that, has given you that attachment. But it's so easy to get overwhelmed with the long list of all the things that others are telling you need to do in your homeschool, or what you think that you need to do in your homeschool, or you're comparing to the public school and saying, that's what I need to do as well. Let's simplify things so that you can succeed and you can turn those tears that are coming from a place of fear into tears of joy. Let's talk about that today and simplify and also think a little bit outside the box and talk about what you should actually teach your homeschool child.
Welcome to Little by Little Homeschool Podcast, where you'll learn tips and strategies that will empower you to home educate your children. I'm Leigh Nguyen, a homeschool mom of over 12 years, which includes 2 graduates. When I started homeschooling, I was pretty much on my own and was desperate for encouragement and help. My mission is to be a source of encouragement and help to you. Whether you are just beginning your homeschool journey or you're deep into the homeschool lifestyle, Little by Little Homeschool wants to help you stay the course, because all the time you are investing into your children is completely worth it. If you're ready to take your homeschool to new levels, keep listening.
Today's topic is often a focus of the one-on-one mentorship that I offer through Little by Little Homeschool. And I love to talk individually about your homeschool, hearing from you, your experience, and learning about your children and your family dynamics. Today's episode, we're going to go macro on that. But if you are looking for a micro level and specific answers to the questions that you have for your situation that you find yourself in right now with homeschooling, there is the one-on-one mentorship program that is available. We meet twice through Zoom. First, we're going to sit down and you get to pick the date and time, actually. And then we will talk about what it all you're and troubleshoot and what you're running into and answer all the questions. And then we're going to do a follow-up. In a couple weeks later, you get to pick again that date and time, and we'll follow up. And we are going to then talk about what you did implement. How did it go? And troubleshoot and answer some more questions. I love to do that follow up because it's just kind of seals the deal, we'll say. And then we can kind of see what worked, what didn't work, and tweak some things. The link for that is always in the show notes and in this episode show notes as well. Or you can go to littlebylittlehomeschool.com/mentorship, and that'll get you to my calendar and you can pick that date and time. Before I personally deschooled, I had to fit it all in. I felt like I had to fit in every single subject and all of the extra stuff, and everything was on equal footing. Every single subject was on equal footing for me. They were all the most important thing to do. And the bookwork and the workbook subjects, those actually had a slight priority. We would make sure we got those done, and we would still get the other stuff. I would still like, we have to get this done, and I would stress out if we didn't. But the goal, listen, this is your goal. It took me a while to figure this out and to realize this, but the goal for homeschool moms is to work ourselves out of a job. And so then you have to ask yourself this question: what do I need to do in order to work myself out of a job? And you're like, what do you mean out of a job? The goal is to raise our children into young adults who become adults who can function well out into the world, they know their mission, they can glorify God, they have that biblical foundation, that biblical worldview foundation, and they know the things that they need to know in order to function well. And so this is going to look a little bit different in every family. You're going to have different priorities and different goals, a different vision, but still the goal is to work yourself out of a job. And every single child, it's going to look slightly different too. Today, every single bullet point that I'm going to make here applies to all ages. And so you just need to adjust. That first, second grader, when it comes to, if we're talking about language arts, their focus is to learn to read and to learn to read well. When I talk about language arts in the high school years, it's just they're not going to be the learning to read. It is going to be something on a much larger scale. And so think of every single one of these bullet points I make is, and I'll touch here and there. I'm not going to necessarily section them off and say, now we'll talk about the elementary years, now the middle, now the high school. But I'm just going to give you a couple of bullet points here of how you can simplify your homeschool and really just focus on what do they actually need and so that you can work yourself out of that job. So within each of these bullet points, I will make some different comments about the different ages that your kids are at and that they will be at. Now, I have these kind of listed, I don't know, I guess maybe this could be a little controversial, is I have a must list, and then I have a don't skip these, but don't go crazy and don't feel stressed out and don't feel like you're missing out on something huge if you don't cover them. So the must list. I don't know. I don't know that they're necessarily in any particular order. I mean, they're all just and again, you have to decide which are going to be the priority. So I have one, two, three, there's five of them here. The first is going to be math. So when it comes to math, the different age regions, they have to know math. Do they have to know, I don't even know the proper terms, complex trigonometry? Is that even a thing? Is that what you call it? I don't know. Do they have to know the Pythagorean theorem? That's math, right? Can you see how much I don't apply those things to my life? Now, some kids, they might go into a field of study where they do need to know that, but most do not. And you will know the kids that are going to need to know Pythagorean theorem, and you're going to know the kids that don't and are going to do absolutely fine in life. I think there really is something to reaching some of those higher levels of math. Sometimes it's just to build some character, but also things like geometry can really come up in real life. I remember some projects that my husband was doing, actually doing an addition for our home, and I remember our daughter, she was, I guess, probably about that age range in doing geometry. And I would walk in and she had her pencil and they're writing on the different studs on the 2x4s and figuring out the different measurements and everything. And she was actually applying the geometry that she had learned. I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. So sometimes you will actually use it in different fields. Have I used geometry? Yeah, to a degree. Do I use algebra? Possibly. I don't know. But there's a lot of basic math that we use just day in and day out. So the first thing I would say is a must is knowing math. How high does that go? It's up to you. But there's going to be the basics. They have to know the basics. Knowing the math facts, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, being good at those, being able to do those easily and well. Think about something simple like money. We do a lot of I'm pretty much on a cash system with my husband, and so he will give me the cash and I go buy groceries with cash. And so I will turn it in to it's usually a teenager who's working at the grocery store, and I sometimes question my ability to count out coins because they will be there and it will take them more than the seconds that I think it should take them to count it out. And I'm like, did I really give them 38 cents? I'm like looking at at their palm. I'm like, yeah, that's 38 cents. I think it's 38. So they start to make me question my ability to count out coins. But no, it's not my ability. It's their ability to count out those coins as well. And I know that they want to be particular, make sure that they don't miss out and then their cash box is low and then, I don't know if they get in trouble, but they will then have a low cash box, and that's not good for them to be able to maintain their job. But just knowing those basics, the basic math that you use every day and that you see people use in the world. Have them get really good at that. Let's move on to what I would say would be the second and final absolute necessary subject. And you're like, wait, what? There's only two subjects listed here? Yes, don't worry, we'll get to the rest of them. Don't. It's okay. The next one is language arts. What falls under language arts? Reading, writing, spelling, vocabulary. Now, of course, that differs in the different age ranges. If they can't really write out their letters, then the writing means handwriting, penmanship. And then writing for older grades would be possibly writing out sentences as paragraphs and writing papers and journalistic articles, writing newspaper articles and letters and all that stuff. So language arts, what is going to give them success in the world? You're going to have some children who are going to be wanting to write a lot more. They might want to write creatively. They might want to actually write a book or write poems, write research papers. And then you're going to have some of the kids that you are struggling to even get them to write one paragraph. And they cry and they say, I don't know what to write about. And there's a bit of a writer's block. And sometimes that writer's block lasts years because I think that writing this is kind of a little bit of a tangent. Feel like it's like a really personal thing. And people are, and kids especially, are afraid of failing at it when you're like, no, it's okay. Just write anything. Write this paragraph about anything about what we saw when we were playing in the backyard. There is no right or wrong. So, language arts, reading, obviously, that's absolutely necessary to be able to do at least the basic reading. Are, are all kids going to be wanting to read Shakespeare and some, think of just some complex books and I know Shakespeare's plays, but think about complex books. Are all of them gonna get to that level? Maybe not. A lot of them might enjoy audiobooks, but just having those skills of being able to obviously the handwriting and then being able to write and then vocabulary and spelling, although there is spell check right now for those that struggle with spelling. But I'm gonna say the 2 main, subjects that you think of, like school subjects, are gonna be math and language arts, okay, that are a must. Now let's think outside the box. This is where, so we're keeping it simple with the math and language arts. Now let's move to the taking it out of the box and let's focus on 3 different things: life skills, soft skills, and electives. What are life skills? I did an entire episode, episode 286, and I will link that in the show notes so you can get all the details on just different ideas of life skills for the different age ranges. So I'm not going to go too in depth on this episode about that, but life skills. Think about the people that you interact with out in the world that don't have life skills. And you're like, oof, it's a little rough. You walk away from that situation, you're like, that was really hard. So think of how can you equip your child to have life skills? And again, that episode 286 is going to have a lot more details, but can your child maintain a home to a degree? Can they cook some basic meals? Can they interact with people? Then they walk into a bank and take out maybe some money from their bank account? Can they go to the grocery store and purchase some things? And this is starting at a young age, being able to do this, and then it just grows as they get older. Now let's get into soft skills. What are soft skills? Soft skills are going to be I feel like they overlap in some degree to life skills because think of one soft skill and could be being able to communicate well. Well, I think that's a life skill as well. Is everybody going to be able to be a communicator like everybody else? No, some people just might be a little bit more shy, but they can communicate. They can get what they need. They can walk into that grocery store. They can ask for directions on where to get something that they can't find. And it doesn't have to be that they are standing up in front of thousands of people and giving a speech. Some of your kids might grow up and be able and do that. And some of your kids like, that's absolutely fine with me, not to stand up in front of people and just knowing how to interact with others. So soft skills, being able to maneuver the internet. Now, this comes with age, and I am not a proponent of giving young children and even middle aged children free access or even high schoolers free access to the internet. But think of all, I feel like sometimes think about where you see some lacking in the world and places that you go in interaction, and then be like, okay, well, I'm going to make sure that to my degree, whatever degree that you have control over it, that your kids are not hindered by that. Some other examples of soft skills would be teamwork. Do they know how to work in a team? And you can just start this with your family. And how can they work together on certain projects? Problem solving, critical thinking. How about time management? That is such a skill. And I didn't quite realize that some people don't have that skill. And the people who don't have that skill of time management. Maybe that's you, but learning how to manage your time. The soft skill of leadership, of being able to take the lead on things. How many times have you been a part of something and they're looking for a leader or somebody to lead and nobody steps up? It's frustrating, right? Because you're like, we're going nowhere. So learning leadership skills. The fifth must I would have on the list to keep things simple and to just accomplish what you definitely need to would be electives. So this is looking at every single individual child. Now, some of these electives might fall under, you might put in some actual subjects, which we'll get to the next section here in just a minute. But electives could be anything. Think of what your child is interested in. Maybe they're really into building Legos. You can add that as a quote unquote elective. Now, a lot of times in the elementary, middle school ages, electives are just kind of their play, their hobby. They're just following their interests. The electives and actually categorizing them and coming up with a name for those electives is something that you do more so in high school when you are preparing a transcript. And I highly recommend having some type of transcript or having something where you have written down all of the courses of study that they have done each year and the resources that you have used. Even if you don't think your child is going to go on to college, just having that. Because what if they do want to go on to college and you haven't written that down? It's very difficult, let me tell you. It's very difficult. And I have kept notes, meticulous notes going through, and I could put together a transcript in probably about 15, 20 minutes for each of my kids if I needed to do that. So, electives, what are they interested in? And that doesn't mean that the electives have to be something that happens in a book or in a workbook, or even that somebody has a course or has some way of teaching your child this. It could be something completely out of the box, and you put together your own course of study. I think it's so important for kids to have that time to pursue their electives. Again, the younger ages, you might call them hobbies. You might call it playing. You might call it interest led learning, but pursuing what they are really interested in. When you are interested in something, you will then continue to consume it until you feel like, I think I've reached the point of knowing all I need to right now. So let's come up with an example of an elective. Could be photography. Could have a young child and you just give them a simple camera to be able to take pictures. Or I might have a child that doesn't really get into it until maybe the tween or teen years. And that is their elective. They have their camera all the time and they are taking pictures and they are learning from what they are taking. And you actually then look at the picture like, oh, I guess I should have adjusted that. And learning how to use the camera on manual. I took a photography course in college. Now, this is really going to date and age me. I did not have an actual camera at the time. I had to borrow it from the college, which they had that option. And we had film and we had to go to a dark room. And I just thought it was so much fun. I really, really enjoyed going to the dark room and doing the pictures and developing them. And I didn't get to know until actually the picture came out what it looked like. I remember having to take notes as I would take each photo, like the different settings that I had everything on. Then I get the whole roll of film developed and I would have to go and look, and then sometimes I had to go back and take those photos again because something wasn't exactly right, and it was a little bit blurry, and so there's a lot a lot more to learn. So now with all the digital cameras, I'm not gonna say it's easier because I don't make anybody feel bad or anything, but I'm like, "Oh, wow, that would have been nice." But photography could be an elective, and you could just come together figure out your own thing. You could just find YouTube videos if they're like, "I'm having a hard time." So, I've had a couple of kids have been interested in photography. I have forgotten a lot of my stuff, and when I was blogging, I then had to remember everything. I had to go back over everything, but there's YouTube videos. You could just find a YouTube video talking about just the different settings and how they relate to each other. You can get a book that is meant for an adult who wants to learn how to do photography, and they can read through that. It doesn't have to be an actual course or an actual textbook. Now, that rounds out my list of 5 must do of simplifying your homeschool and thinking outside the box a bit is the math, the language arts, life skills, soft skills, and electives. And right about now, you're saying, what about the other subjects? Now, I'm not saying to skip things like science and history, which could also include geography and civics and art and music. I am not suggesting that you skip those, but don't push beyond what is needed. Now, let's go into, for example, art and music, or let's just pick one of them, music. You might have a very musical child. And so you actually lean into and push this. You could maybe throw it up to the top categories that I said before and throw that into as electives, but you might you might do that. But you might have a child that doesn't have the natural musical inclination. They maybe appreciate some music, and you're like, well, I want them to be exposed to different genres of music. And so you play music, you talk about it, and that is the extent that you go to through all of your homeschooling. You might do it multiple times throughout the homeschooling years, but don't feel like you have to push beyond what is needed. Now, yes, I do think that a basic understanding of science is needed. And absolutely, we should know history, we should study history, and we should understand it. But a lot of those topics of like the science and the history, geography, civics are picked up and learned and are ones that we dive into a bit deeper when we encounter those. So let's say the geography. You're going to go on a trip. Well, maybe we should actually get out the GPS or maybe even get out a map and take a look, and you're planning trips and you're trying to figure out what is in relation to other locations that you're going. A lot of geography is learned just from that, from actual real world experience. Science. Maybe you decide as an adult, you're going to start a garden or you want to grow flowers, and you actually have to learn a bit of science, and it's something that you want to learn. Obviously, pull your kids alongside with you with that and teach them the things that you are learning. But you might also have a child that is very science minded, that really wants to get into the higher sciences and maybe wants to go to college for engineering. You're going to push into that. You're going to lean into it. You're not pushing that child beyond what is needed. You might, again, have a child that's very musical. And so, therefore, they go really deep into the music. And remember that episode I did with Leslie Martino? I'm going to highly recommend you go back and listen to that if you're like, wait a minute, I thought we all had to learn everything there was about music. And I know for musical people, this might hurt your ears to hear, but not everybody knows how to read music. A lot of people leave the school system or leave their homeschooling and don't know how to read music. And that's okay. They function well. And you're like, oh no, that hurts my heart. That's okay. You know how to do that, but maybe do you know how to build a catapult and the physics behind that and how to do it in a way that no one's going to get injured or nothing's going to break? Probably not. So for those other categories, all those other subjects, yes, expose your children to them, but don't feel like you have to push too far and you have to cover everything or you have to cover everything just a little bit. Let those be the ones that you dive into deeper when the opportunity presents itself. And if you are listening to this episode and you're saying, I need some specifics, I need to go micro with this is where you and I get to talk about it through the mentorship program. Again, you get all that information at littlebylittlehomeschool.com/mentorship. And the link is also in the show notes. But that's where you and I can one-on-one. If there's tears, that's okay. I have cried the tears as well. I have seen and I have heard it all. And I know this is just so tied so tightly to your heart. And I'd love to be able to lead and guide you through that so that you feel confident and can let some of this go, take off some of the pressure off your shoulders so that you can enjoy homeschooling and that you also can equip your kids. Because remember, the goal is to work yourself out of a job. Thank you for listening to today's episode. It's been a blessing to have you here, and I promise to be back at Little by Little Homeschool Podcast very soon, and I'll see you over at the mentorship program.
Thank you for listening, friend. I'd love to connect with you more. You can find social media links in the show notes and share this episode with a friend who could use a boost to her homeschool. See you back here real soon.